In the Imperium of man, there are no blank slates. There are only ledgers. Somewhere deep within a hive city, far below the spires where the sky still exists as a concept, your existence is recorded before you are even aware of yourself. A mark is made, a number is assigned, not a name, not a destiny, just confirmation that another body has entered the system. You are not welcomed into the world. You are processed into it. The first thing you learn is not language, or love, or hope. The first thing you learn is weight. The weight of ceilings pressing down from above, of countless levels stacked atop one another like the layers of a tomb that was never meant to be opened. The air is thick and warm, recycled so many times that it barely remembers what freshness was. Machines breathe for you long before you understand how to breathe for yourself. Their endless hum becomes the heartbeat of your world, a sound so constant that silence itself would feel like a warning. You do not see the sky. In truth, you may not even know such a thing exists. Light comes from flickering lumen strips bolted into rusted frames, casting everything in sickly yellows and dull whites. Shadows gather in corners where the light has failed, and no one is ever quite certain what lives there. Time does not move in days or nights, but in work shifts and ration cycles. Sleep comes when exhaustion wins, not when the world grows dark, because in the lower levels, darkness never truly arrives, it simply waits. You are born where others have already died, and where many more will follow. The space you occupy is not new. It has been used, reused, patched, and forgotten. Walls are layered with the stains of generations, oil, blood, mold, and things no one remembers the source of anymore. The floor beneath you has felt the weight of countless lives, each one grinding forward until it simply stopped. No marker remains. There is no room for remembrance here. From the moment you can understand words, you are taught your place. Not through lessons, but through observation. You watch bodies move through corridors with hollow eyes and hunched shoulders. You hear coughs that never stop and laughter that sounds more like defiance than joy. You learn that pain is normal, that hunger is expected, and that asking questions is dangerous. Those who ask too much tend to disappear, absorbed into the machinery of the hive in ways no one speaks about aloud. Family exists, but it is not what the word once meant. It is less about nurture and more about survival. Adults teach children how to stay unnoticed, how to endure long hours, how to make themselves small when authority passes by. Affection is quiet and brief, because lingering emotions can be a liability. Love is real, but it is rationed as carefully as food, parceled out in moments stolen from exhaustion. Every child grows up hearing the same truth spoken in different ways. This is how it has always been, and this is how it will always be. The Imperium is vast, they are told. Humanity is eternal. Their suffering is not meaningless, it is necessary. These words are repeated until they lose all shape, becoming part of the background noise of existence, as unremarkable as the grinding of distant engines. And yet, even here, buried beneath layers of steel and neglect, something fragile persists. A quiet awareness that life is happening to you, not for you. That your existence, no matter how small or unseen, is being spent every second you draw breath. In the Imperium's poorest levels, life does not begin with possibility. It begins with endurance. And from that first moment, the only unspoken question that matters is not how long you will live, but how much of yourself will be left by the end. Because in the Imperium's poor levels, existence is not something you discover, it is something you are handed, heavy and unyielding, like a burden passed from trembling hands to smaller ones. Before you understand fear, before you understand choice, you understand routine. You learn it by watching, by listening, by feeling the rhythm of suffering repeat itself with mechanical precision. Every sound, every smell, every flicker of failing light teaches you the same lesson. You were not meant to rise, only to endure. There is no ceremony to your arrival into this world. No celebration, no pause in the endless labor surrounding you. Life continues exactly as it did moments before you were born. Somewhere nearby, machines grind on. Somewhere above, entire civilizations go about their lives without ever knowing you exist. And somewhere far below, things move in the dark that have not seen the light of imperial law for centuries. Your birth does not interrupt any of it. It barely registers. As you grow, you begin to understand that poverty here is not temporary. It is architectural. The very design of the lower levels ensures stagnation. Corridors lead nowhere new. Elevators do not descend this far unless they are broken or forgotten. Every path you walk has been walked by countless others who never escaped it. Progress is a myth told by those who live high enough to believe in it. Down here, survival is the only measurable achievement. You are taught early that upward movement is not a goal, it is a fantasy. The spires are spoken of in whispers, as if they belong to another reality entirely. People say the air is cleaner there, the food real, the light natural. But these are stories, passed down like half-remembered legends, stripped of detail and hope. No one you know has ever been there. No one expects to go. Wanting too much only makes the weight of your current life heavier. And yet, despite everything, the human mind adapts. It always does. What would crush someone from the upper levels becomes ordinary here. You stop noticing the cold metal under your hands. You stop reacting to distant screams. You learn to sleep through the sounds of violence, to eat food whose origins you don't question, to accept loss without ceremony. This is not because you are weak, but because you must be strong in the only way that matters here, by continuing. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you will gain something most stories never offer, an understanding of the Imperium not from the throne rooms or battlefields but from the billions who keep it running without ever being acknowledged. By the end, you won't just know how life functions in the Imperium's poorest levels, you'll feel why it never changes. Because this is not just a place where people live. It is a system designed to consume lives quietly, efficiently, and endlessly. And once you truly understand that, you will never look at the Imperium of man the same way again. In the Imperium's poor levels, the architecture itself is an enemy you can never escape. The Hive is not merely a city, it is a vertical world built with brutal intention. Every wall, every corridor, every ceiling exists to maximize efficiency, not comfort. The structures were never meant to inspire, protect, or uplift. They were meant to contain. To stack human lives as tightly as possible and extract labor from them until there was nothing left to give. The lower you go, the older the metal becomes. Rust creeps across bulkheads like a living thing, eating away at supports that should have been replaced centuries ago. Repairs are crude, layered over previous repairs, each one a temporary solution that was never meant to last this long. Pipes sweat constantly, leaking recycled water that carries the taste of chemicals and decay. Floors are uneven, warped by time. And weight, and no one remembers when they were level, or if they ever were. Space is the rarest luxury. Living quarters are little more than compartments carved into the Hive's skeleton, just large enough to lie down and breathe. Entire families occupy spaces designed for one body. Privacy does not exist. Silence does not exist. Even when voices fade, the Hive itself never rests. Somewhere, something is always grinding, pumping, or screaming. The sound is so constant that it becomes invisible, until the moment it stops, because when the Hive falls quiet, it usually means something has gone terribly wrong. Light is rationed like everything else. Some areas are permanently dim, illuminated only by flickering lumen strips that fail more often than they function. Others are drowned in harsh, unchanging brightness that makes sleep difficult and time meaningless. You stop measuring days. You measure endurance instead. How long you can work before your vision blurs. How long before your joints lock. How long before exhaustion becomes pain, and pain becomes normal. Air moves through the poor levels reluctantly, pushed by ancient ventilation systems that were never designed to serve this many people. Breathing is labor. Every inhale carries particles of ash, metal, and industrial waste. Coughing is universal. Those who don't cough are either new, or already dead. Children grow up with lungs that never fully function, and no one considers this unusual. It is simply another inherited trait, passed down like eye color or height. Navigation through the lower levels is a skill learned through repetition. Corridors twist and intersect without logic, because logic was abandoned when expansion became more important than planning. Entire sections are forgotten, sealed off after collapses or infestations, left to rot in darkness. Some say people still live in those places. Others say worse things do. The Imperium does not correct these rumors. It does not need to. Fear is cheaper than maintenance. There are no windows, not because they would be unsafe, but because they would serve no purpose. The poor levels are buried so deep that even if a window existed, it would show nothing but more metal. The concept of distance loses meaning here. The sky becomes an abstraction, something described but never experienced. Many live and die without ever understanding that the world was once wide and open. And slowly, subtly, the environment reshapes the mind. You stop imagining escape because there is nowhere to imagine escaping to. You stop asking how things could be better because better has no reference point. The Hive teaches patience, submission, and acceptance with ruthless efficiency. It does not need guards in every corridor. The walls themselves do the work. This is the architecture of poverty in the Imperium of man. Not accidental, not temporary, but deliberate, enduring, and perfectly suited to one purpose: to ensure that those who live here remain exactly where they are, for as long as the Imperium requires them to be. In the Imperium's poor levels, work is not a phase of life. It is life itself. From the moment a body is strong enough to be useful, it is assigned purpose, not through choice or talent, but through necessity. Labor here is not about ambition or progress. It is about keeping the massive, indifferent machine of the Hive functioning one more day. And when a worker fails, the Hive does not mourn. It replaces. Shifts begin without ceremony and end without relief. Time is measured in quotas and alarms rather than hours. Many never know how long they have worked in a single stretch, only that their muscles burn and their thoughts grow slow. Jobs are inherited as often as they are assigned, passed down through families who have filled the same roles for generations. If your parents worked the reclamation vats, chances are you will too. Not because you were suited for it, but because you were close enough when a position needed filling. The work itself is often simple in concept and brutal in execution. Repeating the same motion thousands of times a day. Monitoring machinery older than any living memory, praying it doesn't fail on your watch. Hauling materials whose purpose you are never told. You do not need to understand what you are contributing to. Understanding is inefficient. Obedience is enough. Mistakes are punished swiftly, not out of cruelty, but because delay costs productivity. Injury is expected. Hands are crushed. Limbs are burned. Backs are broken under loads that no human frame was meant to bear. Those who can still move are sent back to work. Those who cannot are removed from the labor pool. Medical care exists, but only to the extent that it preserves function. Pain relief is minimal. Recovery is a luxury few can afford. You learn quickly that stopping is more dangerous than pushing through agony. Rest, when it comes, feels unnatural. Exhaustion is so constant that sleep becomes shallow and dreamless, more like temporary shutdown than recovery. Bodies collapse wherever space allows, curled against cold metal or stained walls. There is no separation between living space and working space. The Hive does not believe in boundaries. Everything belongs to production. Perhaps the most insidious part is how normal it all becomes. Children grow up watching adults return from shifts hollow-eyed and shaking, and they do not recoil. They take notes. This is what adulthood looks like. This is what survival requires. There is no resentment strong enough to overcome hunger, and no fatigue deep enough to excuse disobedience. The system does not rely on force alone, it relies on inevitability. You are never told how much your labor matters, because that knowledge would imply value. Instead, you are taught that your duty is sacred, that your suffering feeds the Imperium, that somewhere far above, humanity endures because you endure first. Whether this is true is irrelevant. Belief keeps the line moving. Doubt slows it down, and so the days blur together into a single, endless effort. Work until your body weakens. Work until you are replaced. Work until you are forgotten. In the Imperium's poor levels, labor is not a means to an end, it is the end. In the Imperium's poor levels, starvation rarely arrives suddenly. It creeps in slowly, quietly, until it becomes familiar. Rations are calculated to sustain function, not health. Meals are measured, processed, and stripped of anything that could be called excess. Food is not meant to satisfy, it is meant to keep hands moving and bodies upright. Flavor is irrelevant. Pleasure is unnecessary. You eat because you must, not because you want to. Over time, hunger reshapes the body and the mind. Stomachs shrink. Bones become more visible beneath the skin. Children grow thin and remain that way, their development permanently stunted by scarcity they never chose. People learn to ignore the constant ache in their gut, the way it flares after work shifts or sharpens during long stretches between meals. Complaining does nothing. Everyone is hungry. Individual suffering dissolves into collective expectation. Disease thrives where bodies are weak and spaces are crowded. The poor levels are perfect breeding grounds, warm, damp, and densely packed with human life. Illness spreads quickly and lingers longer. Coughs echo through hab blocks like a shared language. Skin infections, lung rot, and internal failures are so common that most people can identify symptoms better than any trained medic. Knowing what's wrong doesn't mean it can be fixed. Medical care exists in theory, but in practice it is triage at best. Treatment is reserved for those whose recovery will return them to productivity. The rest are given minimal attention, if any at all. Pain is managed only when it interferes with work. Many learn to treat themselves using scavenged supplies, half-remembered remedies, or sheer desperation. Survival often depends less on curing illness and more on enduring it longer than others. Death, when it comes, is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, a body that fails to rise, a worker who doesn't report for a shift, a space that becomes vacant and is quickly reassigned. There are no funerals in the poor levels, no time set aside for grief. Loss is acknowledged with silence and then absorbed into routine. Mourning is a luxury, and luxuries are not tolerated here. What's most disturbing is how little fear remains. Not because life is easy, but because suffering has become predictable. When disease is constant, it loses its terror. When hunger never leaves, it stops being shocking. People do not ask if they will get sick. They ask when. They do not wonder if they will die young. They plan as if they will. And through it all, the hive continues to function. Bodies weaken, but replacements are always available. The Imperium does not need its poorest citizens to be healthy, only numerous. As long as there are enough hands to work and enough mouths willing to accept less, the system holds. In the Imperium's poor levels, decay is not a failure of governance. It is a feature. In the Imperium's poor levels, faith is not a philosophy, it is a survival mechanism. When hunger is constant, when sickness is inevitable, and when labor consumes every waking moment, belief becomes the last possession no authority can easily confiscate. The imperial creed seeps into every corner of life here, carried on whispered prayers, battered icons, and half-remembered sermons passed down like heirlooms. For many, it is the only explanation that makes suffering bearable. Shrines appear in the most unlikely places. A rusted alcove between machinery. A broken wall reinforced with scrap metal. A flickering lumen strip illuminating a crude aquila carved into steel by hands that shook from exhaustion. These spaces are not grand, nor are they officially sanctioned. They exist because people need somewhere to kneel, somewhere to believe that their pain is seen, even if no human eyes ever acknowledge it. The Emperor is spoken of with reverence and fear in equal measure. He is the father of humanity, the eternal guardian of mankind, the reason the Imperium still stands. But in the poor levels, he is also something else, an explanation. If suffering is widespread and unending, then it must have meaning. If life is brutal, then it must be a test. Faith teaches that endurance is virtue, that obedience is holy, and that those who suffer without complaint are closer to the emperor than those who live in comfort above. Priests and preachers do not promise relief. They promise purpose. They speak of sacrifice as destiny, of toil as devotion, of death as service. Their words are carefully chosen, not to inspire change, but to prevent it. Rebellion is heresy. Questioning is weakness. Hope, when it appears, is always deferred, to another life, another reward, another place beyond the reach of the hive. Yet faith is not only a tool of control. It is also a quiet form of resistance against despair. People pray not because they expect miracles, but because prayer gives shape to fear. It allows them to speak to something greater than the walls around them. In a world where individuals mean nothing, belief restores a sense, however fragile, that existence has value beyond productivity. Children learn prayers before they learn history. They memorize litanies that speak of loyalty, duty, and sacrifice. These words become mental armor, repeated during long shifts or moments of terror. Faith does not remove suffering, but it gives it structure. It turns chaos into ritual, and pain into obligation. And so belief persists, even when evidence does not support it. Perhaps especially then, because in the Imperium's poorest levels, to abandon faith entirely would mean confronting the possibility that suffering is not noble, not necessary, and not watched over by any higher power. For many, that truth would be more unbearable than the grind of daily life. Faith endures because it must. It is the final refuge of those who have nowhere else to go. In the Imperium's poor levels, law is not a shield, it is a weapon. Authority does not exist to protect the vulnerable, it exists to maintain output. The presence of order is measured not by fairness but by efficiency. Disappearances are common. Someone speaks too loudly. Someone gathers too many people. Someone asks the wrong questions. One day, they simply do not return. Their absence is not discussed. Survival depends on learning what not to notice. Grief becomes internal, unspoken, buried alongside everything else that might draw attention. Violence is not constant, but it is always possible. And that possibility shapes behavior more effectively than any written law. People police themselves, not out of loyalty, but fear. Neighbors report neighbors. Families turn inward. Trust erodes because it is too dangerous to maintain. The Imperium understands this well. Division is easier to control than unity. There are no trials here, no impartial judgments. There is only compliance and consequence. Enforcers do not need to explain themselves, because their authority is absolute. Their presence is a reminder that the Imperium sees the poor levels not as communities, but as assets that must remain productive at all costs. And so order is maintained, not through justice, but through terror calibrated to just the right degree. Enough to prevent uprising, not enough to disrupt labor. In the Imperium's poor levels, the law does not ask who you are or why you act. It only asks one question: do you threaten stability? If the answer is yes, you are removed. In the Imperium's poor levels, crime is not rebellion, it is necessity. Hunger, exhaustion, and desperation shape behavior more than conscience ever could. Stealing a ration, trading a few hours of labor for a bit of comfort, or joining a gang for protection are not acts of defiance, they are acts of survival. In this world, morality bends to circumstance, and the line between right and wrong becomes almost invisible. Children grow up learning this lesson early. They see adults take what they need, manipulate systems meant to control them, and negotiate survival in ways the enforcers cannot easily track. What outsiders call corruption, they call cleverness. What others call theft, they call ingenuity. The law may punish, but it cannot prevent the countless small acts of necessity that keep life moving. Gangs and informal networks form not out of ambition, but out of mutual protection. Members trade favors, share scarce resources, and watch each other's backs because failure to do so often results in death. Loyalty exists, but it is conditional, fragile, and calculated. Betrayal is a common currency, and trust is measured in moments rather than years. Children born into these groups understand that survival is a balance of cunning, aggression, and constant awareness. The black market thrives here, invisible to the upper levels and largely ignored by the authorities unless it interferes with productivity. Medicines, food, scrap materials, and sometimes even weapons circulate in these shadow economies. Participation is not illegal in concept, it is required by circumstance. Those who refuse are usually the first to disappear or perish. Mutants, scavengers, and desperate individuals further blur the boundaries of right and wrong. Some commit acts that others would label monstrous, but when society offers no protection or justice, survival becomes the only metric that matters. What is immoral in theory is practical in the harsh reality of life beneath the spires. And yet, despite the erosion of conventional morality, a form of order persists. It is an instinctive, self-regulating code born from shared experience. Do not endanger those who sustain you, protect those who protect you, and take only what you must. In this way, even crime becomes predictable, structured, and survivable. It is the shadow ethics of the forgotten, a morality forged not by law or faith, but by necessity. In the Imperium's poor levels, crime is not chaos, it is survival dressed in pragmatism, and those who fail to adapt pay with their lives. In the Imperium's poor levels, wars are not fought on battlefields with banners or fanfare, they are fought in the shadows, where no record is kept and no one above notices. These invisible wars are the result of scarcity, desperation, and survival instincts sharpened over generations. Turf, food, and access to vital resources become the currency of conflict, and the rules are unwritten, enforced only by whoever survives the day. Tunnels twist unpredictably, and forgotten corridors become battlefronts. Gangs clash with rival factions over territory that is often too dangerous or too insignificant for the Imperium to care about. Mutant outbreaks, contamination, and mechanical failures frequently escalate these skirmishes, turning small disputes into deadly chaos. Every conflict leaves its mark on the bodies and psyches of those who live here, though the higher authorities never register a single casualty. To the Imperium, these are merely expendable units in an endless system. Cult activity thrives in these conditions. With faith and hope scarce and fear ever present, whispers of forbidden knowledge find fertile ground. Heretical groups rise and fall quickly, often crushed by rival gangs or by the indifferent enforcers, but not before leaving scars on the population. Children grow up amidst this turbulence, learning not loyalty or courage, but calculation, timing, and survival tactics. Every day is a lesson in who to trust, when to flee, and how to navigate the constant threat of death. Even the most brutal conflicts are rarely total. The population adapts. Civilians learn to move silently, to blend in, and to avoid notice. Death is inevitable for some, but life continues for others. In this environment, experience is a teacher harsher than any overseer, and every decision can be a matter of life or death. The Imperium rarely intervenes. These invisible wars are inconvenient but ultimately inconsequential to the vast machine above. As long as production continues, as long as the lower levels remain filled with labor, the system tolerates the carnage. Conflict, then, becomes part of the environment, another force shaping life, just as hunger, disease, and exhaustion do. In the shadows of the Hive, survival is not about righteousness or victory. It is about timing, adaptability, and the ability to remain unnoticed long enough to see another day. Here, wars are fought not for glory, but for the mere chance to live. In the Imperium's poor levels, imagination is a dangerous luxury. Children are taught not to aspire, because ambition invites attention, and attention can be fatal. Stories of the upper spires, of sunlight, fresh air, and abundance, were whispered like legends, half remembered and distorted with each retelling. They are fairy tales in a place where fairy tales get people killed. To hope too much is to set yourself up for a lifetime of disappointment, or worse, punishment. Yet, even in the harshest conditions, small dreams persist. They take fragile forms: a better ration, a warm moment in a cold corridor, a fleeting sense of safety. People clutch these tiny aspirations like currency, trading them in private thoughts to maintain sanity. Every imagined escape, every fleeting fantasy, carries a cost. The sharper the dream, the deeper the disappointment when reality intrudes. The lack of long-term prospect shapes character in profound ways. People do not plan for the future, they calculate survival for the next hour, the next shift, the next meal. Childhood is compressed into lessons of endurance rather than exploration. Adolescence is measured in stamina and adaptability rather than growth. And adulthood is the repetition of those same cycles, repeated until the body fails. Stories of the upper levels, the vast halls, open skies, and thriving streets, circulate like forbidden knowledge. They are more myth than memory, yet they haunt those who hear them. They plant a subtle, dangerous seed, the awareness that life could be different. The Hive punishes this awareness in small ways: suspicion, accusation, or sudden reassignment. People learn to suppress longing, to pretend contentment, and to rehearse gratitude for whatever scraps are provided. The cruelest part is that even these faint dreams are rarely shared. They are private, protected in the recesses of the mind. To voice them risks ridicule, punishment, or even death. And yet, the human need to imagine, to hope, cannot be entirely extinguished. It survives in whispers, in fleeting glances at forbidden alcoves, in brief moments when children dare to ask, "What if?" In the Imperium's poorest levels, dreams are both a rebellion and a burden. They are the fragile proof that humanity persists, even in the places designed to crush it. But they are also reminders of what is forever out of reach, shaping a life where longing is a constant companion, and disappointment is inevitable. In the poor levels, being noticed is rarely a blessing. Attention from above is a signal, not of recognition or care, but of intervention, often violent and indiscriminate. The imperial authorities do not descend to offer aid or comfort, they descend to enforce, to extract, and to correct perceived inefficiencies. And when the Hive's forgotten citizens are acknowledged, it is never for their worth, only for their utility, or their failures. The arrival of overseers, commissars, or enforcement squads is felt before it is seen. Orders ripple through the lower levels, shifts accelerate, movement is restricted, access to resources becomes tightly controlled. Fear spreads faster than information. Families tighten, gangs dissolve or reposition, and everyone braces for consequences they may not fully understand. The Imperium rarely explains itself. It does not need to. Authority here relies on obedience, not comprehension. Conscription is one of the harshest forms of recognition. Able-bodied citizens may be drafted into labor brigades, industrial service, or even the military forces, often without consent. The rules are simple: comply, survive, or disappear. Those who resist rarely survive. Recruitment is less about choosing the best and more about stripping numbers from the population where they are cheapest and easiest to replace. Purges are another consequence of being noticed. They are swift, brutal, and often arbitrary. A minor infraction, a whispered rumor, or an unfortunate misunderstanding can trigger violent sweeps that leave entire sections of the lower levels decimated. Survivors are left to rebuild, to adapt, and to continue living under the constant weight of fear. The Imperium does not measure the human cost, only the restoration of function matters. Even infrastructure, upgrades, can be a form of punishment. Sections of the lower levels are closed off, reassigned, or restructured in ways that displace families and communities. People are shuffled like pieces on a board, their lives uprooted in the name of efficiency. The system never pauses to consider the human consequences of its interventions, it only pauses long enough to ensure that labor continues uninterrupted. Being noticed changes the calculus of survival. Anonymity once protected you, attention now threatens your life. Every action is scrutinized, every misstep amplified. And yet, even in these moments of peril, the hive continues to grind, indifferent to the individual tragedies unfolding beneath its endless spires. In the Imperium's poor levels, recognition is rarely mercy. It is a signal that the machinery above has decided you exist, and in that decision lies danger, for being seen often means being consumed. In the Imperium's poor levels, stability is never guaranteed. The systems that keep millions alive, meager rations, failing machinery, recycled air, are as fragile as the people who depend on them. When one element fails, it sets off a chain reaction, and the consequences are immediate, brutal, and unavoidable. A collapsed water main floods entire corridors. A ventilation failure chokes blocks with smoke and ash. A single fire, started by carelessness or accident, can turn familiar corridors into death traps. Panic spreads faster than control. People, conditioned to endurance and obedience, suddenly find themselves powerless. Long-established routines collapse, and the small adaptations that sustained life no longer suffice. Hunger intensifies as food stores are damaged or destroyed. Injured workers cannot be cared for because medical stations are overwhelmed or incapacitated. The hum of machinery, the heartbeat of the hive, becomes erratic, uneven, a warning that survival is no longer assured. Tensions rise between neighbors, factions, and families. Those who once cooperated now turn inward, driven by instinct and fear. Even the smallest disputes become deadly, as desperation sharpens every action. Gangs exploit the chaos to seize territory. Cults and heretical groups use the disorder to expand influence. Mutants, neglected by oversight, swarm into exposed areas. What was once predictable and controlled becomes a maelstrom of uncertainty, where life hangs by the thinnest of threads. The Imperium may intervene, but rarely in time to prevent catastrophe. Enforcement squads descend, not to aid, but to reassert dominance, often exacerbating the suffering they claim to resolve. Their arrival brings terror, not comfort, as they crush perceived rebellion and restore function through fear, not compassion. The fragile equilibrium is replaced with violence and obedience, leaving behind a scarred population in an environment that has been further degraded. And yet, even in these moments of utter collapse, the hive endures. Survival depends on adaptation, cunning, and sheer will. Ordinary citizens are forced to make impossible choices, abandon the weak to save themselves, steal from those who cannot resist, or risk everything for the faint hope of safety. Every decision carries weight, every miscalculation costs life, and the human toll is invisible to those above. In the Imperium's poor levels, chaos is not an exception, it is inevitable. And when the systems finally break, life becomes a crucible where only the sharpest, fastest, and most adaptable can hope to endure. In the Imperium's poor levels, the moment of crisis is also the moment of clarity. Every hardship endured, every ration stretched, every injury survived has led to this point, the apex of struggle where the human body and mind are tested beyond ordinary comprehension. Here, survival is no longer about routine, it is about instinct, cunning, and the raw refusal to surrender. Every breath, every motion, every decision is a fight against the machinery, the environment, and even the instincts that would tell you to stop. Workers, scavengers, and families navigate corridors that have been torn apart by fire, collapse, or structural failure. The air is thick with smoke, dust, and the acrid tang of chemicals. Hunger gnaws relentlessly, and disease thrives unchecked. Bodies weakened by years of malnutrition are forced to function at the limit of human endurance. Pain is constant, but to pause is death. Every second of hesitation can be fatal. Faith, so long a fragile anchor, is tested here in the crucible of extreme adversity. Prayers are whispered in moments of terror, rituals repeated with shaking hands. Belief in the emperor or in divine purpose becomes a shield, a fragile illusion of control in a world that has none. Some cling to faith with desperation, others abandon it entirely, replaced by calculation, anger, or raw survival instinct. In this environment, Ideology is less important than reaction, and conviction can both save and destroy. Choices are never easy. To help someone may mean risking your own life. To ignore suffering may preserve it. Alliances form and fracture in seconds, guided by necessity rather than loyalty. The strongest do not always survive. Sometimes, the clever, the lucky, or the relentless prevail. Death is visible, omnipresent, and impartial, an audience to human endurance in its most brutal form. And yet, despite the horror, life persists. People adapt, learning to move through danger with precision, to anticipate failure before it strikes, to exploit even the smallest advantage. Those who endure carry with them scars, physical, mental, and spiritual, but they also carry knowledge, the rules of survival in the Hive's most unforgiving conditions. Each day survived is both a victory and a reminder of how fragile that victory truly is. In the Imperium's poor levels, this is the apex of existence, a pulse-pounding struggle where every moment is a test, and survival is the only prize worth fighting for. It is relentless, unforgiving, and absolute. In the aftermath of catastrophe, the poor levels do not pause. Collapse, fire, disease, and violence leave scars, but the machinery of the Imperium demands continuity. Families, gangs, and individuals who survive are forced to rebuild within the same poisoned walls, under the same flickering lights, amid the same stench of decay. There is no mourning period, no ceremony for the dead, no chance to catch one's breath. Life resumes immediately, indifferent to those who have fallen. The infrastructure is patched hastily, often crudely. Collapsed corridors are reinforced, but only just enough to function. Water is rerouted, but contamination persists. Machinery is repaired, but barely. The Hive itself seems to shrug off the devastation, as if to remind its inhabitants that survival is not a reward, but a requirement. There is no time to grieve, no space to recover. Every moment wasted is another opportunity lost to the unforgiving system. People who survive carry both visible and invisible scars. Limbs bear the marks of injury, faces show the traces of disease, and eyes hold the weight of trauma that cannot be spoken aloud. The memory of those who perished is swallowed by necessity. Remembering is dangerous, attachment makes one vulnerable. The Hive encourages forgetfulness, teaching survivors that acknowledgement is a luxury that can cost life itself. Even communities that once found fragile cohesion are fractured by catastrophe. Alliances dissolve under stress, and trust must be rebuilt slowly, cautiously, if at all. Each person adapts in their own way. Some grow harder, sharper, and more calculating, others withdraw, carrying grief inward until it becomes a silent companion. The weak are lost quickly, and the strong survive, but survival is not triumph, it is endurance, the quiet continuation of suffering. Yet, life persists. Children are born into the same conditions, learn the same routines, and adopt the same resilience. Generations continue without ever leaving the shadows. The Hive swallows them whole, shaping their minds, bodies, and expectations to match the relentless rhythm of survival. Every repetition strengthens the cycle, making it more difficult to imagine an alternative, more humane existence. In the Imperium's poor levels, aftermath is not calm, it is continuity. Loss is absorbed, suffering persists, and the machine continues its endless grind. Survival is the only constant, and those who endure learn that life here is not about victory, hope, or recognition. It is about moving forward, one exhausted step at a time, in a world that does not notice and does not care. In the Imperium's poor levels, existence itself is both a gift and a punishment. Generations live and die within walls that never offer relief, under lights that never soften, breathing air that never cleanses. Life here is measured not in accomplishments or milestones, but in endurance, how long one can persist before the weight of the Hive finally crushes them. Recognition from above is rare, hope is dangerous, and comfort is a fleeting illusion. And yet, despite all of this, humanity endures. It endures not because the Imperium cares, not because conditions improve, and not because individuals are extraordinary, but because survival has become instinct.